Hi everybody, we're back for chapter 5 of Alice in Wonderland in my garden. And this one, it's been a few days since we read the last chapter, hasn't it? So we're up to, for a little reminder, the chapter with the caterpillar on top of the mushroom. So let's see what happens in chapter 5. The caterpillar and Alice looked at each other for some time in silence. At last, the caterpillar took the pipe out of its mouth and addressed her in a sleepy voice. "Who are you?" said the caterpillar. This was not an encouraging opening for a conversation. Alice replied rather shyly, I hardly know, sir. Just at present. At least, I know who I was when I got up this morning, but I think I must have changed several times since then." "What do you mean by that?" said the caterpillar sternly. "Explain yourself." "I can't explain myself, I'm afraid, sir," said Alice, "because I'm not myself, see?" "I don't see," said the caterpillar. "I'm afraid I can't put it any more clearly," Alice replied very politely, "for I can't understand it myself to begin with, and being so many different sizes in a day is very confusing." "It isn't," said the caterpillar. "Well, perhaps you haven't found it so yet," said Alice, "but when you have to turn into a chrysalis, you will some day, you know, and then after that into a butterfly. I should think you'll feel it a little queer, won't you?" "Not a bit," said the caterpillar. "Well, perhaps your feelings might be different," said Alice. "All I know is it would feel very queer to me." "You?" said the caterpillar contemptuously. "Who are you?" Which brought them back once again to the beginning of the conversation. Alice felt a little irritated at the caterpillars making such very short remarks, and she drew herself up and said very gravely, "I think you ought to tell me who you are first." "Why?" said the caterpillar. Here was another puzzling question, and as Alice could not think of any good reason, and as the caterpillar seemed to be in a very unpleasant state of mind, she turned away. "Come back," the caterpillar called after her. "I have something important to say." This sounded promising, certainly. Alice turned and came back again. "Keep your temper," said the caterpillar. "Is that all?" said Alice, swallowing down her anger as well as she could. "No," said the caterpillar. Alice thought she might as well wait, as she had nothing else to do, and perhaps, after all, it might tell her something worth hearing. For some minutes it puffed away without speaking, but at last it unfolded its arms, took the pipe out of its mouth again, and said, "So you think you're changed, do you?" "I'm afraid I am, sir," said Alice. "I can't remember things I used to, and I don't keep the same size for 10 minutes together." "Can't remember what things?" said the caterpillar. "Well, I've tried to say, 'How doth the little busy bee?' but it all came different," Alice replied in a very melancholy voice. "Repeat, 'You are old Father William,'" said the caterpillar. Alice folded her hands and began. "You are old, Father William," the young man said, "and your hair has become very white, and yet you incessantly stand on your head. Do you think at your age it is right?" "In my youth," Father William replied to his son, "I feared it might injure the brain, but now I'm perfectly sure that I have none. Why, I do it again and again." "You are old," said the youth, "as I mentioned before, and have grown most uncommonly fat. Yet you turned a back somersault in at the door. Pray, what is the reason for that?" Here's old Father William doing his somersault. I hope you can see the pictures okay outside. Can you see him standing on his head? How unusual. Do your grown-ups stand on their heads? I wonder if they can. In my youth, said the sage, as he shook his grey locks, I kept all my limbs very supple. By the use of this ointment, 1 shilling a box. Allow me to sell you a couple. You are old, said the youth, and your jaws are too weak for anything tougher than suet. Yet you finished the goose with the bones and the beak. Pray, how did you manage to do it? In my youth, said the father, I took to the law and argued each case with my wife, and the muscular strength which it gave to my jaw has lasted the rest of my life. You are old, said the youth. One would hardly suppose that your eye was steady as ever. Yet you balanced an eel on the end of your nose. What made you so awfully clever? I have answered 3 questions, and that is enough, said his father. Don't give yourself airs. Do you think I can listen all day to such stuff? Be off, or I'll kick you downstairs. Here's the young lad asking his father lots of strange questions. It's a poem that Alice is reciting, isn't it? That is not said right, said the caterpillar. Not quite right, I'm afraid, said Alice timidly. Some of the words got altered. It is wrong from beginning to end, said the caterpillar decidedly, and there was silence for some minutes. The caterpillar was the first to speak. What size do you want to be? It asked. Oh, I'm not particular as to size, Alice replied hastily. Only one doesn't like changing so often, you know. I don't know, said the caterpillar. Alice said nothing. She had never been so much contradicted in all her life before, and she felt that she was losing her temper. Are you content now? Said the caterpillar. Well, I should like to be a little larger, sir, if you wouldn't mind, said Alice. 3 inches is such a wretched height to be. It is a very good height indeed, said the caterpillar angrily, rearing itself upright as it spoke. It was exactly 3 inches high. But I'm not used to it, pleaded poor Alice in a piteous tone, and she thought to herself, I wish the creatures wouldn't be so easily offended. You'll get used to it in time, said the caterpillar, and again it put the pipe into its mouth and began to smoke. This time Alice waited patiently until it chose to speak again. In a minute or two, the caterpillar took the pipe out of its mouth and yawned once or twice and shook itself. Then it got down off the mushroom and crawled away into the grass, merely remarking as it went, one side will make you grow taller, and the other side will make you grow shorter. One side of what? The other side of what? Thought Alice to herself. Of the mushroom, said the caterpillar, just as if she had asked it out loud. And in another moment, it was completely out of sight. Alice remained looking thoughtfully at the mushroom for a minute, trying to make out which were the 2 sides of it. As it was perfectly round, she found this a very difficult question. However, at last she stretched her arms round it as far as they would go, and broke off a bit of the edge with each hand. Now, which is which? She said to herself, and nibbled a little at the right-hand bit to try the effect. The next moment she felt a violent blow underneath her chin. It had struck her foot. She was a good deal frightened by this sudden change, but she felt that there was no time to be lost, as she was shrinking rapidly, so she set to work at once to eat some of the other bit. Her chin was pressed so closely against her foot that there was hardly room to open her mouth, but she did it at last and managed to swallow a morsel of the left-hand bit. Come, my head's free at last, said Alice in a tone of delight, which changed into alarm in another moment when she found that her shoulders were nowhere to be seen. All she could see when she looked down was an immense length of neck, which seemed to rise like a stalk out of the sea of green leaves that lay far below her. What can all that green stuff be? And where have my shoulders got to? Oh, my poor hands! How is it I can't see you? She was moving them about as she spoke, but no result seemed to follow, except a little shaking amongst the distant green leaves. And there seemed to be no chance of getting her hands up to her head, and she tried to get her head down to them, and was delighted to find that her neck would bend about easily in any direction, like a serpent. She had just succeeded in curving it down into a graceful zigzag, and was going to dive in amongst the leaves, which she found to be nothing but the tops of trees under which she had been wandering, when a sharp hiss made her draw back in a hurry. A large pigeon had flown into her face and was beating violently with its wings. "Serpent!" screamed the pigeon. "I am not a serpent," said Alice indignantly. "Leave me alone." "Serpent, I say again," repeated the pigeon, but in a more subdued tone, and added a kind of sob. "I've tried every way, and nothing seems to suit them." "I haven't the least idea what you're talking about," said Alice. "I've tried the roots of trees, I've tried banks, I've tried hedges," the pigeon went on, without attending to her. "But those serpents, there's no pleasing them." Alice was more and more puzzled, but she thought there was no use in saying anything more until the pigeon had finished. "As if it wasn't enough trouble hatching the eggs," said the pigeon. "But I must be on the lookout for serpents night and day. Why, I haven't had a wink of sleep in 3 weeks." "I'm very sorry you've been annoyed," said Alice, who was beginning to see its meaning. "And just as I'd taken the highest tree in the wood," continued the pigeon, raising its voice to a shriek, "and just as I was thinking I'd be free of them at last, they must needs come wriggling down from the sky. Oh, serpent!" "I am not a serpent, I tell you," said Alice. I'm a "Well, what are you?" said the pigeon. "I can see you're trying to invent something." I I'm a little girl," said Alice, rather doubtfully, as she remembered the number of changes she had gone through that day. "A likely story indeed," said the pigeon, in a tone of deep contempt. "I'd seen good many little girls in my time, but never one with a neck such as that. You're a serpent, there's no use denying it. I suppose you'll be telling me next that you've never tasted an egg." "Well, I have tasted eggs, certainly," said Alice, who was a very truthful child. "But little girls eat eggs quite as much as serpents do, you know." "I don't believe it," said the pigeon. "But if they do, then they're a kind of serpent. That's all I can say." This was such a new idea to Alice that she was quite silent for a minute or two, which gave the pigeon the opportunity of adding, "You're looking for eggs. I know that well enough. And what does it matter to me whether you're a little girl or a serpent?" "It matters a good deal to me," said Alice hastily. "But I'm not looking for eggs, as it happens, and if I was, I shouldn't want yours. I don't like them raw." "Well, be off then," said the pigeon in a sulky tone, as it settled down again into its nest. Alice crouched down among the trees as well as she could, for her neck kept getting tangled amongst the branches, and every now and then she had to stop and untwist it. After a while, she remembered that she had still held the pieces of mushroom in her hands, and she set to work very carefully, nibbling first at one and then at the other, and growing sometimes taller and sometimes shorter, until she had succeeded in bringing herself down to her usual height. It was so long since she had been anything near the right size that it felt quite strange at first, but she got used to it in a few minutes, and began talking to herself, as usual. "Come, there's half my plan done now. How puzzling all these changes are! I'm never sure what's going on from one minute to another. However, I've got back to my right size, and the next thing is to get into that beautiful garden. How is that to be done, I wonder?" As she said this, she came suddenly about an open place, with a little house in it about 4 feet high. "Whoever lives there," thought Alice. "It'll never do to come upon them this size. Why, I should frighten them out of their wits." So she began nibbling at the right-hand bit again, and did not venture to go near the house till she had brought herself down to just 9 inches high. And that's the end of chapter 5. Whose house do you think she has found? Where is Alice now? And after all that trouble of making herself the right size, she's chosen to make herself tiny again. Can you imagine what it would be like to be just this big? Maybe you can draw me a picture of what you think you could see if you were Alice this small on the ground. Or maybe write me a story as if you were that small and imagine a day in your house being only 9 inches tall. If you have a ruler or a tape measure, you could find out how tall that is and maybe find some things in your house that are that height too. And the caterpillar, he will become a chrysalis. Do you know what that is? And do you know what he will be after he's been a chrysalis? See if you can find that out too for me. If you do any of these tasks or find any of these answers out or have a go at any of this, email it to me at the Year 1 email address because I'd love to see what you've been getting up to. And feel free to just send me a little message to say hello too and let me know if you've been following the chapters of Alice in Wonderland with me. I'll do chapter 2 tomorrow, probably inside because as much as it's beautiful out here, very bright. So I'll see you tomorrow. Stay safe.